It's 2 o'clock in the morning, and the British Army is in position, waiting in the dark to ambush the French. But there's a massive problem. Their Spanish allies, who are supposed to be launching this attack with them, are nowhere to be found. The British commander, the Duke of Wellington, rides to the Spanish camp to investigate. He discovers the Spanish General Gregorio Garcia de la Cuesta fast asleep on a pile of cushions. When woken, Cuesta offers nothing but nonsensical excuses. This 1809 map of the Iberian Peninsula shows where Britain and Spain are supposed to be united, but following the path toward the river Alberche, we see the immediate threat, a massive French army marching directly toward their position. Facing a highly organized, unified enemy force requires flawless coordination. When an alliance is fractured by delays and broken promises, it puts every soldier in the field at immediate risk of destruction. General Cuesta was a septuagenarian aristocrat who considered himself an absolute master of the military arts. He carried a deep disdain for foreigners. Because of his immense pride, Cuesta looked at the Duke of Wellington as a mere beginner. He felt there was absolutely no reason to listen to British advice on how to fight a war on Spanish soil. When the two commanders sat down to discuss tactics, Wellington quickly found he didn't even need a translator. He soon learned the Spanish word for no, because that was Cuesta's answer to almost every proposal. The British and Spanish forces had the numbers and the firepower to match the French, but their command structure was entirely broken, making any shared military strategy completely impossible. After sleeping through the planned ambush, Cuesta suddenly decided it was time to act. He swung immediately from extreme caution to reckless aggression, completely ignoring Wellington's warnings. Dressed in these striking uniforms, Cuesta's infantry marched out alone towards Madrid, actively pursuing a French army they believed was in retreat. But the French forces hadn't fled. Marshal Victor had actually been reinforced, doubling his army's size. He simply turned his troops around to face the approaching Spanish. Finding themselves hopelessly outnumbered, the Spanish advance instantly collapsed. Cuesta turned his entire army around and fled in panic back toward the river Tagus. Charging forward without consulting your allies leaves you exposed. Cuesta's unilateral decision triggered a disastrous retreat that dragged the British army right back into the path of an overwhelming French counterattack. Wellington had already set up strong defensive positions about 3 miles safely behind the river, waiting for the retreating Spanish forces to cross. But Cuesta stubbornly refused to move past the water. He kept his men pinned in a dangerous no-man's land, with the river directly at their backs, facing certain destruction if the French attacked. The situation grew so desperate, Wellington actually dropped to his knees in the dust, physically begging the proud Spanish general to retreat to safety. Cuesta eventually agreed to cross, but sitting in the British camp, Wellington realized the grim truth. His allies could only be relied on to occupy space on a battlefield. This humiliating standoff marked the death of their military partnership. Going into the actual battle, the British command knew they would have to face the fighting alone. Look at the sheer scale of this painting. On July 27th, the combined French armies clashed with the Anglo-Spanish lines, beginning the Battle of Talavera. As the armies lined up, a few French skirmishers fired some casual, distant shots. In response, the entire Spanish front line fired a massive, deafening volley at absolutely nothing. Frightened by the smoke and the sheer volume of their own gunfire, 2,000 Spanish soldiers suddenly broke ranks, shouted treason, and bolted. In the rush to escape, the stampeding troops knocked right over Cuesta's private garage, which the elderly general traveled in. The fleeing men then ran straight through the British camp, looting supplies before streaming down the roads into Portugal. Historians have 2 very different records of Cuesta's leadership. In public, Wellington wrote he was obstinate as any gentleman at the head of an army should be. Privately, another officer's diary recorded him as a perverse, stupid old blockhead. The terrified reaction to a few warning shots meant the Allied forces lost thousands of their own men to sheer panic long before the main French assault even began. Through all this chaos, Wellington remained perfectly still. Listening to the massive, useless Spanish volley, he turned to an officer and said, "If they will but fire as well tomorrow, the day is our own. But as there seems nobody to fire at just now, I wish you would stop it." We do have to be careful with these surviving accounts. They were written exclusively by British soldiers and politicians, who carried their own heavy prejudices against their Spanish allies. Talavera proved that the British forces would need exceptional discipline to survive an isolated war on the continent, which leaves us with a question to consider. How does relying on unpredictable allies change the way generals must plan for war?